My name is Lance. I'm a senior product specialist here at LabKey. Today, we're going to be discussing what it looks like to move beyond spreadsheets for sample tracking. We know a lot of labs are currently using spreadsheets to kind of manage their inventory, and that has some pitfalls to it, even if it is in a kind of customized environment. But we're going to be discussing how we can kind of take the pitfalls of using spreadsheets and moving them to a more modern system. So we're going to start with a little bit of an overview as to who I am, who LabKey is, just so you have some context of where we're coming from, why we're experts in the subject matter. And then we're going to discuss spreadsheets, look at a software that can help you all. But if you have any questions as we go through the webinar, feel free to put them in the chat or in the Q&A, and I'll get to them, especially towards the end. So let's go ahead and get started. So before I worked at LabKey, I actually started in the lab as a lab tech, working in organ and tissue donation, where I was processing hundreds, if not thousands, of samples every day in the lab. While I was working in the lab, I've used a wide range of everything from commercial limbs to homegrown limbs to spreadsheets and even some paper records. So I've seen the pros and cons of all of these systems. And then I'm really excited about how Sample Manager really establishes a lot of those pros in all the systems, but then it works on improving the cons and to making a software that's easy to use for our lab techs that lab techs like using, but it's also keeping track of all of your samples in secure environment. As far as LabKey goes, we have over 20 years of experience in scientific data management. We started as part of the Fred Hutch Cancer Research Center here in Seattle, Washington, but since then we've grown and we've partnered with a bunch of different organizations all around the world. With all of our clients, we work very closely with them to make sure that they have the support that they need and that we're growing our software in ways that make sense for them. So we're very excited to work with our clients and potentially help you kind of get started in your journey of migrating out of spreadsheets. So many biobanks are still relying on spreadsheets or even paper records. And while that may have worked in the past, it doesn't scale, right? You're going to have a lot of pain points. And some of those include version control issues. You don't always know which file that you're working on is current. This leads to a lack of real-time visibility. You can't see or know for sure what's in your inventory, what's across your different labs or departments, or even where they are in their location. The information is often missing, it's outdated, or it's hard to find. And this kind of plays into having siloed data. Files that are living on individual machines or in shared drives that some users have access to, but not everyone does, makes collaboration really difficult. Labs working in silos will often duplicate data or lose critical context. This can increase the cost and time that's needed to perform simple tasks. So it's really important to kind of move into a more collaborative environment. There's also a lot of audit risks with working with spreadsheets. You'll be missing timestamps, you don't have a chain of custody, and there's no immutable logs that's really tracking all of the changes that are taking place. This leads to a lot of compliance concerns or complete inability to be compliant. Without audit trails or sample lineage, it's hard to pass inspections that you may have, and it also poses a greater risk when something goes wrong because it makes investigating samples that are missing or having incorrect results more difficult if you don't know the full life history of a sample. And what may be most terrifying are errors and overwrites. With no real-time validation, mistakes are easy and costly. This will inevitably result in human error and data loss. A simple deletion, if you're messing with a spreadsheet or typo, can cause massive downstream issues, such as the wrong results being attached to a specific sample or patient, running the wrong test or pulling the wrong samples. And if something like this happens, especially in a biobank related to organ and tissue donation where I worked at, this could have really devastating results for a patient that could result in disease transmission, death, or an organ or tissue not being able to be transplanted when it really should be. So we really want to be able to make sure that we're tackling all of these pain points with spreadsheets and a system that we're migrating to. So what's really the alternative for these spreadsheets? And it looks like the video is not loading. But essentially, the alternative is looking for a real-time tracking and inventory control, automated location mapping, knowing exactly where those samples are in the freezer, box, tube, having a real chain of custody, barcode scanning, quality control checks, and seamless integrations with LIMS, ELNs, and clinical databases. All of this should be in a cloud-based, secure, and fully auditable system. Um, let's see. So when you're getting ready to migrate to those systems that have those kind of pros to them, how do you do it? How do you go about it? So here at LabKey, we really want to make sure this process is as easy as possible for our clients, because a lot of the time you can't stop your lab processes to try to migrate to a new system. You have to keep going. So this migration should be as fast as possible. And we do this every single day for our new clients. And this is kind of outlining the different steps that we typically follow for our new clients. Step one, you'll share us your requirements either in the form of a data structure spreadsheet, which is just outlining your data requirements, or you can send us your historical data that already has a lot of that information. Once we have a chance to review your requirements, we'll schedule a sample manager kickoff meeting. This is where we review the data together. I ask any questions that I might have about your data, how everything should be structured, and then we'll do some basic training on the system. It won't be too in-depth, just to kind of have the basic details. Training more in-depth comes later on. After that kickoff meeting, I'll actually go through your data, I'll clean it up, try to fix any errors that might be in there, such as samples being stored in the same location, having typos within your kind of text choice fields that should be kind of cleaned up a bit. And I'll get it in a way that can be formatted to import into Sample Manager for you, because every LIMS has different requirements, so we want to make sure that we can get it set up for you. I'll also configure your system, make sure I set up your sample types, your storage units. That way, once you're set up, you can actually just hit the ground running. I'll import that version of Sample Manager onto my own server. We'll have another meeting while I walk through all of the structures that I set up. We can make whatever changes we need to make on that meeting. And then once everything looks good, I'll actually import that to your own server and we'll do a more in-depth training that walks through your specific workflow so you know exactly how to add samples, check them in and out of storage, add test results, and whatever else you need to do within the software. We'll do this training for groups of users or one-on-one trainings, depending on how individuals work best. And then after that point, once you're implemented and onboarded, we're here for support at any time. If you have any questions, if you need to make changes, we're going to support you all the way through. This process takes a matter of weeks. We've seen implementations go from a single week if everything's very neat and everything has all of the requirements structured. But then if you have really messy data, sometimes it takes between 4 to 6 weeks. Other systems can take months, if not years, to kind of get through. So we really want to make sure you're successful right away. And when it comes to our software, right, what are the main benefits of it? So you're being onboarded. Now that you're using it, you should see quite a few things. You should see your data integrity is going to be increasing. We're going to be limiting how users can enter their data through things like text choice fields so we can reduce the amount of typos that are in a system. We'll have date fields so you can't have random text there. This is really going to improve the searchability of your samples. The more data integrity you have, the more searchable your samples are, right? Because it's easier to filter through things. And this sample traceability not only allows you to filter through the different data fields that you have to find those specific samples, but we're also going to be tracking the child samples that you'll have. So if a sample is being aliquoted or derived, we'll be able to see what patient those samples came from or what study they're a part of. And then we'll also be able to track test results to samples. So everything is going to be linked together. And then you'll also be able to see exactly where samples are in storage, down to the very slots inside of a box that your sample's stored in. Um, and all of this is going to be in a really customizable software. So Sample Manager allows you to have as many different sample types as you need, as many different data fields as you need to make sure that you're capturing the information that you need. We really believe that the software shouldn't force you to adapt your science to it. The software should adapt to your science. Specifically, if you're working in a bunch of different fields, we don't kind of limit the type of science you're working in. And for our software, we have a few different tiers to really make sure that you're paying for only what you need, right? Some folks do need a full-on limb systems with a bunch of different integrations, whereas some others, they just need to track where their samples are in storage and some metadata associated with them. So we try to make sure we're matching you up with the right tier of software to make sure that you're getting the most out of it. We have Sample Manager Starter, which is looking at registering your samples, where they are in storage, and kind of being able to query those samples and have a full audit trail. Sample Manager Professional has everything in Starter, plus assay data management so you can track your test results, workflow management for those more complex SOPs, and electronic lab notebook and API access. When you start moving towards our LIMS software, we're starting to have more automation in there so we can really make sure things are moving along very quickly. This also helps with some quality control to make sure users aren't making mistakes in the steps that they need to carry out. We also have more visualization tools, and then we start adding some more complex integrations with our software. So today we're going to be really looking at Sample Manager Starter and Professional of what that might look like for a general lab. The system we're looking at today is going to have some mice with some blood samples off of it, but because we can name those whatever it is that they need, you can really adopt it to your specific science. So if you're in geological sciences, you can have core samples or dirt samples. You can have manufacturer parts if you need to. So just keep in mind as we go through these, you can rename these whatever it is that you need to match your specific use case. So this is going to be my homepage of Sample Manager. And as we go through this, if you have questions, let me know. More than happy to answer those towards the end. So when I log in, this is my homepage. I'm going to have an overview of everything that's going on in my lab. I can see the different sample types that I have, what statuses that they're in. And again, you can have as few or as many of these sample types as you'd like, and you can name them whatever it is that you need. These statuses are also configurable to match the terminology that you're using in the lab, so you don't have to use the terms like available or consumed. You can really rename those. When we scroll down, we have an overview of the boxes that were recently used in my lab. These boxes are dynamic to kind of show which boxes were last used by my team, so I can quickly grab the last box that was put into the freezer and try to further condense my samples to make sure we're not having too many half-full boxes that are taking up too much space in my freezers. When I hover over them, I can see the breakdown of different sample types we have inside of each of these boxes, as well as the space that's available. Then I'll be able to see the freezer, shelf, rack box that they're located in. To the right, these are our workflow tasks. So these are a series of SOPs that have been assigned to myself. And I have a list of samples that I need to carry out, as well as a due date. You can see I'm almost a year overdue for this specific task, so I should probably get on that pretty soon. We also have notebooks if you need to capture your experimental records or any paper logs that you want to replace. This is a great place to do this with our electronic lab notebooks. To navigate through Sample Manager, we have this dashboard. This is our super menu. So this is where we're breaking down all of the different types of data associated with your specific lab. We have source types, which is where your samples are coming from. This is usually something like a patient or a study. All of these source types can also have metadata associated with them. So if you have a patient, you can have a date of birth, age, gender, whatever it is that you want to capture with those patients. Then we have our sample types, which are the physical things we're working with. These are things like your blood samples, DNA, PBMC, dirt, core samples, whatever it is that you're working with. We have our assays, which are the tests that we're performing on these samples. These are also just actions that have data outputs to them. We have storage, which is where you're storing your samples, workflows, which are those SOP tasks. We have pick lists, which is just a list of samples I need to keep track of over a period of time, and then our electronic lab notebooks. We can also partition data so we can restrict what samples certain users have access to through our folders. So this is kind of a great way if you have some more sensitive data that shouldn't be shared with everyone in your lab. But for right now, let's go ahead and check out my blood sample type. This is going to show all of the different samples that I have registered under the specific sample type in my lab. And as you can see, we have a bunch of different columns of data. All of these columns are configured by me, so I said which ones are important for us to capture. You can have as few or as many as you like. All of these are also filterable, so you can really narrow down the type of samples that you're looking at to make sure that you're only seeing the samples that you want. You can apply more than one filter at a time as well. From here, you can select whichever samples you want to work with. You can edit them, you can derive them or create child samples off of them, add them to a test, a pick list, workflow job, move them around in storage. You can also export these into a CSV, Excel, or TSV file to make sure that you can share these details with anyone else outside of your lab. To get these samples in, you can also manually add them through our user interface in a really easy to use system. It's very reminiscent of Excel, so it's really quick for our users to learn. We also support importing spreadsheets or using an API if you need to communicate with different systems. Some other things that are really fun with these, we can also kind of see where they are in storage directly from this grid view. So you can kind of click on this. It's going to bring up the box view. You can see where they are in storage. And we'll also keep track if there's any aliquots with these samples. So you can kind of see how much you may have of a specific item. But for right now, I'm going to search for a specific sample that I like to show for my demos. And this is blood sample 4733. I can see that it's consumed, but when I click on it, I'm still able to get the details of that specific sample. I can see how many aliquots the sample has and how many of these are available. I can see what notebooks the sample is referenced in, as well as all of the metadata associated with it. And Sample Manager is a sample-centric system, so we're really keeping close track of how this sample is related to everything else in the lab. When I pulled up this lineage view, I can see that this blood sample was derived from this mouse, and that this mouse is part of this specific study. I can also see that this blood sample has those 6 aliquots, but then we also have some PBMC derivatives and some DNA derivatives off of those PBMC samples. So we're keeping very close track of how everything's related in the lab to make it really easy for you to understand what's going on. If I go to my mouse tab, for example, though, let's say I want to see all my samples that are coming off of a mouse. This is a super mouse with a lot of different samples off of it, so sometimes these visualizations aren't as useful, but we do have the samples tab that's going to pull up a list of all of my samples that came off of this mouse. So I have 73 samples, 26 of them are blood samples, 17 are DNA, 15 are PBMC, and so on and so forth. I can also see all of the different test results that this specific mouse has. So if we're running a study on some patients, I can see how maybe their test results are changing over a period of time, highlight any discrepancies between them. Or maybe I can see, well, we're having an additive here. Their results change by this much. So maybe there's some correlation with it. This makes it really easy to kind of keep track of how everything is related as well. And then we have our workflow job, so we can kind of keep track of the progress that everything's going through. This is something really useful. If you have a client submitting samples, you can see which one of their workflow tasks are still pending in case they have any questions about them. But if we go back to kind of my blood sample that we saw earlier, let's go ahead and look at one of the aliquots that are available. So we have this blood 4733 aliquot. It was currently removed from storage, but it's still marked as available. I can go to the timeline and see what information was updated to the specific sample. So I can see that I registered this sample last year in October. I can see that I've added it to storage. Hannah went ahead and updated the sample so we can kind of see what changes were made, that we updated the units to milliliters. We don't have an amount, but we set the status as to consumed. And then I updated this back to available because maybe I found it and it wasn't discarded. So we can kind of do investigations through these sample-centric timelines, because usually, more often than not, only 1 or 2 samples are missing. We do also have a system-wide audit log in case you want to kind of see everything that's going on in the system. So this is kind of a great overview of specific samples. But now let's go ahead and look at what it looks like when our samples are in storage. So I'm just going to click on this hyperlink for a storage location for this sample, and it's going to bring me the exact box and the exact row and column that the sample stored in will be highlighted. I can hover over any of these samples and it's going to provide me some more context of them. I can also kind of click around to see what's going on with these specific samples, and we'll have more of that metadata on the right-hand side. If I scroll down, I also have this box's entire manifest. So if I'm shipping out a box of samples, it's really fast to just download this box's spreadsheet here so you can share it to whoever's accepting those samples. From this view, as well as from that grid view that we saw earlier, you can also move your samples around, and you can do it with one sample at once, or you can do it with multiple. Just for visualization purposes, I'm going to do it with a single sample. So we have this blood 5319, and you'll note that we'll currently have an amount of 50 milliliters and a freeze thaw count of 0. I'm going to go ahead and check the sample out, and I'm going to put a reason for doing this. This is going to go into my audit log. When I check out a sample, we're going to highlight the space as pink, which means it's reserved. We're assuming if you check out a sample, you want to put it back into that exact location. So we won't let anyone else check out that sample, and we'll keep track of where this was so you can quickly put it back. If you want to free up that space, you can move it to another box, such as, or to like a workbench. So I'm going to check the sample back in. It's going to ask me how much I've used when I checked it out. So we currently have 50 milliliters. Let's just say I'm going to use 10 milliliters. And then let me move my zoom controls out of the way. So we have 10 milliliters that are being taken out, and we're going to increment our freeze thaw count. When I check my sample back in, we're going to reduce the amount to 40 milliliters, and we're going to increase our freeze thaw count to 1. So that way we have real-time information of what's going on with these specific samples. And again, you can do it with multiple samples at once. If I wanted to move a sample, we'll kind of bring up a list of all of the different boxes that you have. And with the system, we're going to jump to the last box that was used for that specific sample type, so you can try to condense your samples together. Otherwise, you can find whichever box you want to add them to and select that specific box. We will show you how much free space are inside each of these boxes. That way you're not trying to go through freezer after freezer, box after box, just trying to find some free space. So we keep these up to date in real time. You can also remove these samples from storage. If you do that, we'll mark the status as consumed, and we'll mark that sample as not having an amount available, just so you're not trying to find samples that are completely empty. So I'll remove that sample, and as you can see, it freed up that free space, but we still have an audit log here in case I made a mistake. I can see what sample I just removed in case I need to go back and re-add it to storage. So now that we have our sample data in here, we have our samples in storage, we might want to start going through our workflow processes. And these workflows are a series of tasks that are assigned to specific users of what they need to carry out with specific samples. Here you can see I'm going to be receiving some blood tubes, taking aliquots, and then I'm going to be running some assays. With these tasks, I have these specific samples kind of tracked with it. And if they're in storage, I'd also be able to see where they are in storage for it to be very quick to kind of grab them for these workflows. As I go through these tasks, I can import my assay runs to kind of make sure we have all of our test results in here. With our assays, we're splitting our data into a couple of different segments. We have our run details, which is what's going to be applied across all of our samples for that specific run. Usually it's something like a test kit or an instrument. This is useful in case a test kit gets recalled. You know all of the samples that have been impacted. And then we have the results, which are, the individual results for every single sample, the different values that you want to keep track for them. Once I import those results, again, they'll be part of that workflow task. I can mark that step as complete and move on to my next task. These workflows can send email notifications to whichever users are assigned to them. And then you can also have groups of users just be notified that steps are being progressed. Usually a lab manager wants to be included on that. These jobs also allow you to have metadata associated with them, which is really useful if you're needing to ship out samples. You can quickly add a tracking number in the courier company that is expecting to kind of pick up those samples. So if something gets lost in shipping, you can quickly get back here and see what's going on with those samples. These workflow tasks are configurable to match your unique SOPs, and we can definitely help you get those set up as well. We then also have electronic lab notebooks to keep track of your experimental records. These notebooks can have specific templates, so you're always entering in the data the same way every single time. And you can actually collaborate with these notebooks, share them amongst different users. And once the data is in there, you can submit it to a manager for an electronic signature and then download the notebook to share it with whoever may need it, along with any relevant data. These notebooks can also be associated with other notebooks, samples, sources, assays, or workflow jobs. And it works really similar to social media, where you have the @ sign and then you can tag whichever samples you want. You can hover over them, we'll show some metadata associated with those samples, just so you can make sure you're working with the right set of data. These notebooks can have inline images or graphs as well, so we really can capture all of the relevant information for your experiments. So now that we have your data in there, you have your test results, you have your workflows, we need a really easy way of searching for your samples. And with Sample Manager, we have a few ways to search for them. We start earlier in those sample grids that you can filter through all of those data columns. You can also use barcodes to scan in whichever samples you're looking for, manually type in sample IDs, or we have a tool called Sample Finder. And this is a really powerful tool if you don't know the exact sample IDs that you're looking for, but you know the characteristics that you're looking for. And we're doing this based off of the lineage properties or the sample properties that these samples have. And this means I can look for all of my samples with characteristics from a source type, like a patient, if I'm looking for birth date ranges or specific disease diagnosis or just kind of specific strains. Here I'm looking for all my mice with a bulb C strain, and it's going to quickly pull up all of the samples that meet that criteria. I can add more filters if I'd like, and if it's a really complex search, but I'm going to be doing that search a lot, I can save that search and quickly kind of jump between those different types of queries that I'm doing. Like, want to find all of my samples that have expired today or earlier and pull those from storage if I need to. So this is kind of a great tool for labs to use. And this is kind of the very general basics of Sample Manager. But if you'd like, we can also do a custom demo with you to really dive into what it would look like for your specific use case. We also do offer free 30-day guided trials where we're actually configuring the system for you and porting an example of what your data looks like. That way, you're not spending the trial just trying to set up the system. You can actually get your hands on your workflow processes and what that would look like with Sample Manager. But if you have any questions, I'd love to open up the floor to chat and kind of answer anything that you would like to kind of see. And then, of course, we're also here and available to answer any questions if you have something afterwards. So I'll go ahead and go into the Q&A in the chat. Um, and yes, we will actually be sharing this recording with you afterwards. If you want to kind of reference it, feel free to do that. We also have some great recordings on our website or our YouTube channel, so you can get some more information there. Um, yeah, some questions that we get quite often is what does it cost to have customer support with that? What is the implementation fee for that? So we don't charge any extra for our customer support or implementation. That's all included in the price of the software. We truly believe that it's better for you to get value out of that software and charge you more for it. We want you to be successful, so that's why we don't charge for that. We really kind of value that partnership. Let's see, what other questions do we have? Can you track the expiration date of certain reagents? Yes, definitely. So all of our samples can have an expiration date if you'd like, and we can actually manage what types of data that you're tracking in here. And expiration dates is actually one of our system default fields. It makes it a little bit easier to kind of keep track of that if they all have the same thing. We'll kind of have a red tag on a sample if it's expired, so you can set that up. But if you have other sets of data, you can really configure that in a point-to-click system. You don't have to have any programming knowledge at all to use it, so it's very easy to use. And then, of course, with those queries, you can set up, I want to find all my reagents or all my samples that are expiring within a certain time frame, so you can pull them from storage very quickly. But fantastic question. Yeah, so one question we get is, are barcodes supported? Yes, for sure. And we support barcodes in a couple of different ways, depending on what your needs are. So if your samples are pre-labeled, which means they already have barcodes on there, we can support that. You would essentially mark a field as being searchable by barcode, or you would have that barcode be your sample ID. And then you would just scan it in. You can scan it into storage, scan it when you're searching, a bunch of different things you can do with that. We do also support printing barcodes directly from Sample Manager. So if I wanted to print off barcodes for these three samples, I would be able to print off those labels and kind of set up whatever template I want for them. We integrate with a third party called Bartender that allows you to connect to any printer with a Windows driver. It makes it a lot easier. I know there was a news story recently about how there was a huge mix-up with samples because they were using hand-labeled things. So I would definitely recommend using barcodes and printed labels to avoid those issues. Yes, and you can track lot numbers for sure as well. A lot number would be a custom field under your reagent. So if I go to my inventory sample type, I might have lot numbers, but that would be a custom field that you can track. So if something does happen with those lot numbers, you can quickly find all of your reagents that are impacted. And then if those reagents are associated with an assay, you can see whatever tests are also associated with those reagents. But fantastic question. Another question we get is, can you attach files to specific samples or assays? Yes, so you can attach raw files to them. So you can have PDFs, spreadsheets for like raw data if you want, pictures. You can attach those to sample sources, assays, workflows, or our ELNs. Um, if they are very large files, for example, sequencing files can be very large. We also support URLs. So it can take you exactly where that sample is stored if it's stored in another cloud or something like that. And then we also have questions, can you integrate with other databases? Yes, so you can definitely integrate with other databases with our APIs. We have like Python, R, SQL scripts, so you can really make sure importing and exporting in a way that makes sense for you. For data that's already in Excel, how can we migrate? Yep, so that is also included in our support. So we can help make sure that your spreadsheet is in a format that Sample Manager can read. We can clean it up for you, and then we can import that spreadsheet for you. If you'd like to do it on your own, we can also train you on how to do that. And then once it's in the right format, you'll click Add, Import from File, you'll drag and drop that spreadsheet, and then it'll upload those samples for you. So it's a pretty easy to use system within our sample manager software. Fantastic. And then do you provide training materials for our teams? Yep. So we do have training materials in a couple of different ways. We can lead group training sessions, which is usually a great way to do an introduction to Sample Manager, where you have your end users in one meeting. We'll walk through the software, the workflow processes, and then it's usually more useful if those team members have a chance to play around with the software, get their hands on it, so then they can kind of pile up level different questions that they have. Um, and then from there, we do one-on-one training sessions or office hours, essentially. We'll provide handouts to them that have documentation. And then we also have video tutorials on how to do things so we can try to support ways that they learn best. So database security level. Yeah, so we host all of our servers in their own kind of private clouds within AWS, which has some very strict security requirements. Every user has to log in with their own unique password and own unique kind of email. So we can kind of make sure that we're supporting security there. We also have multi-factor authentication. So you can kind of make sure if a password's not enough, there's another way to add another level of security there. And then we perform monthly updates to our software. And this includes security updates because it is an ever-evolving world. We want to make sure we're on top of it. We also monitor your server for anything that might be out of the norms for any security risks out there. So we take security very seriously. And if you have any kind of more in-depth questions, let me know. I'm more than happy to kind of answer those and provide some handouts on our IT requirements. And then if you have any other questions, feel free to drop them in the chat. Otherwise, feel free to contact us. We're more than happy to help, more than happy to set up a custom demo for you or set up a guided trial so you can play around with it first. We really love kind of working with all of our clients, and they've always kind of let us know what feedback they have. In general, they really love how easy to use and configurable our software is for their requirements. So we'd love to kind of get you set up with our software. But yeah, thank you all so much for joining us. Always feel free to reach out. Otherwise, have a great rest of your day. Thanks again.